Two.
Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Hercules and the Space Gods, I bring you a special edition of UFO entity Enigma. Today we're going to be looking at sex in the Celestials, and we have our esteemed panelist, Tim Swartz.
Hi, Hercules.
Hello. We have Setna Khamuast of Kemet,
Hello.
and we have Brian Walker of Brian's Drive-In Theater, who will open the doors to understanding the mysteries of pop culture and alien sex.
As always, thank you very much.
Um, Now, I am Greek, as everybody knows, although I got my DNA test in the other day, and it turns out my definition of Greek has greatly expanded. My ancestry has the Mediterranean kind of like in the middle, and I have ancestors all around the Mediterranean. So I'm now of the Greek world, such as it was in the days of Alexander and the days of the Phoenicians, of the days of the Romans. So anyway, I'll redo my introduction at some particular point. But my spirituality is mythic and Olympian. And that means, yes, my spirituality includes the Olympian gods. Now, the Olympian gods were considered to be aliens by very many people who ascribe to the ancient astronaut or ancient alien theories. They had relations with humans. According to the tales that we have surviving, they were beings of light who were able to shapeshift into any shape, be it human or animal or weather phenomenon. And in any of those shapes, because with Perseus's mother, Zeus impregnated her is a shower of golden rain. With Leda, who is the mother of Helen of Troy, and Castor and Pollux and Clytemnestra, he appeared as a swan. And with Hercules' mother, Alcmena, he appeared as her husband who was off to war. So the Greek gods were able to transform their shapes, and in any of those shapes, they were able to impregnate mortal women, as well as each other and the other peoples that existed in the Greek mythical world, like nymphs and satyrs and centaurs and so forth. So I believe that these intelligences, whatever they might eventually turn out to be, have been with us from the beginning. In the lore, they don't claim to be from outer space. They claim to be generationally from here, although their ancestors came from the starry void and an eternal night. And this belief has continued. And today we're going to be exploring it from various angles. And we'll start with Tim Swartz.
Why, thank you, Hercules. And as always, it's a great pleasure to be with you with these shows, with you, Brian, and Michael. So I just this is a rather controversial subject, and so if I step on anybody's toes or say anything that they would consider crass, then forgive me. But when it comes to sexuality and the supernatural, paranormal, UFOs, cryptids, all of the above, there is a long history of that. And I suppose, like humans, the non-human entities seem to be just as obsessed with sex as we are. You go back through time, look at ancient traditions, writings, you'll find all kinds of interesting stories dealing with sexuality, either involving each other or bringing humans in on the fun. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, you've got the angels that were sent to earth in order to look after mankind. Some translations call them the Watchers. And they were supposedly non-sexual beings whose job was to keep an eye on us, but apparently they kept too close an eye on us because after a while they started admiring women,
Mhm.
especially, and that's the way it's listed in the Bible. You know, they saw the women were quite fetching, and decided to throw their jobs aside and to take as many as they wanted as wives. Now, the last time I looked, as far as I know, angels aren't supposed to be able to do that. So obviously, we're missing out on something translation wise on just exactly what the Watchers were. But then you have a whole then pantheon of different creatures that came about from these couplings, you know, between the sons of man and the daughters of Eve. You had the giants then that was one of the reasons supposedly that God decided that he was going to wipe the slate clean with Earth and and start again. But if you go and then look at the traditions of like the fae and the fairy and other fairies and other kinds of non-human types of entities that supposedly exist on the earth with us, there is also a very big um, emphasis on sex between them and humans. Now, some of these creatures would use the the enticement of sex in order to lure humans in to, you know, eat them or, you know, or other dastardly things. You know, sometimes they would have sex with them and then eat them, kind of almost like paranormal praying mantises.
Mhm.
Um, but a lot of times these relationships actually were because of love. It maybe started out as lust, but then there would be actual romance between humans and these non-human entities that often resulted in children. Now, of course, there were rules that the humans had to abide to, and if those rules were broken, then and generally it was female. It would be like the female nymphs or water spirits or other types of creatures who would take on a human husband. But if the husband did something wrong, and almost inevitably they would, then their wife would disappear and oftentimes take the children with them. There's one popular story that exists all up and down the northern coast of Europe involving um, seal spirits, and there's a name I can't remember what it is right now.
Selkies.
Selkies, thank you, Hercules. That the Selkies would come on shore and take their skins off, revealing a human like being, you know, underneath the skins, and then they would hide the skins and remain human on the lands. But then when it was time for them to go back, they would put their skins back on. They would turn back to seals and go back. Well, oftentimes the human male would find these skins and keep them hidden in order to keep their wives from running away. And so you had these stories of the wives who, even after they had children, would rediscover their skins and then go back into the ocean, leaving everybody behind, you know, for their human children to mourn on the shores for their skelky moms to come back to them, but they never would. So you take that into more modern times when, and I know that a lot of times, and there's a cat in my office right now, I just noticed. So if he hops up on my lap, then that would be his glorious
We
appearance.
all have cats here, so you're in good company.
But you know, a lot of people tend to overlook or maybe choose to overlook the sexual aspect with the UFO phenomena. But throughout the modern UFO era, we've had no, numerous cases of the horny flying saucer folks coupling with people. Now, you know, you have the more recent iterations of this with the whole, you know, anal probing things, you know, and that's not what, you know, that's not what I'm referring to. Especially in the 50s and 60s, there were cases of people, oftentimes men, sometimes women, being abducted by a landed UFO and the occupants inside. And probably the most well-known case would be Antonio Villa-Boas from Brazil, who was a farmer in the 1950s. And he was out in his field one night plowing, and they would plow at night because it was so hot that it would be almost impossible to work during the daytime. When a craft landed nearby, and this guy was literally drug off of his tractor and taken inside by a group of diminutive, not midget types of creatures. They were shorter than he was, but they were encased in suits, so he couldn't tell what they looked like. But once he was taken inside, they took their suits off, and they looked fairly normal, though they didn't talk. They conversed with each other in a series of like growls and barks, as he put it. But he was stripped naked, and then he was sponged down with some kind of oily liquid, and then put inside of a room all by himself, which then filled with like a gas or a mist that actually made him sick to his stomach. But shortly after that, the door opened and a female came in, and she was human looking enough, and she was nude as well, that, I mean, he could tell that she had all the right parts, though her face was somewhat different than ours. The chin came down into a point, and she really didn't have any lips, just like really, you know, just like a thin line. But she had everything else. I mean, she had breasts, and he said that her pubic hair was bright red, even though the hair on her head was like a white blonde. But he said that almost immediately, and he blamed like either the mist that they pumped into the room or the oil that they had spread all on him. He got aroused, and they coupled a couple of times, in fact. And he said that she responded like a normal human would. And but he was left with the impression, because of the noises she made, they didn't, like I said, they never talked, that he almost felt like that he was having intercourse with an animal, even though she responded like a human. And when they were finished, she actually pointed to her belly and then pointed up to the sky. And even though it was, you know, clear to everybody else that she was saying that, you know, whatever we did here, you know, is going to live someplace else, he thought it meant that they were going to come back for him later on and take him away. But then afterwards, they gave him a tour of the ship, and then and let him loose. Now, this was a guy that later went on to become a lawyer, and a very well-known person, you know, in his community and throughout the country. So I doubt that this was a story that he just made up. And in fact, he had physical evidence. At one point, they had attached a device to his chin that drew blood, and he was left with like a scar on his chin from this. And I guess he had a higher than normal radiation level too when he was checked afterwards. But you know, this was just one of a number of well-known accounts of extraterrestrials or UFO people, whatever you would want to call them. You know, I mean, I use the word extraterrestrial Hercules because that's kind of the easiest,
Yes.
yeah, easiest thing to say. You know, the non-human entities seen coming out of UFOs. But there's always been this preoccupation with sex, and we see it now to a point of the abductees saying that one of the reasons that they're being abducted is to steal DNA, or not steal, but you know, to take DNA, either sperm or eggs, in order to help whatever this race is, because they've destroyed themselves with pollution or what have you, and that by taking our DNA, they hope to revitalize their race. Which, again, going back to the old stories of the fairies and good folk, a lot of times it was said that the good folk would couple with people in order to shore up their own genetic makeup with humans. That for some reason they needed that. They needed our vibrant genetics in order to keep themselves going. So you know, I don't think it's a coincidence that throughout history we've seen the same kind of stories, the same kind of reasoning why this preoccupation with us, with sex with us, and the non-human entities. So you know, I'll leave it at that. I mean, I don't know. I know we don't have as many people on the conference tonight as we usually do, but you know, anybody who's interested. I mean, I've written a number of articles on this subject and contributed, like you, Hercules, to a couple of books with Timothy Green BECKLEY's Inner Light publications. One of them was the book called "Screwed by the Aliens."
Yes, I
which,
was
which yeah, I mean, it's a hilarious title, but you know, there's a lot of really good articles and chapters in that book. So I recommend that everybody, you know, if you're interested in the subject, and you should be, because it's a fascinating topic that I think has really been overlooked by a lot of researchers over the years, just because the whole sex thing just leaves a lot of people uncomfortable, and especially sex with non-human entities. You know, you talk about that and, you know, a lot of people just get up and leave the room. But because of the history behind it, it really is a subject that I think is really worth looking into.
I think so too, and thank you, Tim. And just to cap off what you were saying, according to some traditions, when the angels revolted, some stayed with God, some fought against God, and some were neutral. So, like, it was roughly a third of each. And the ones who were neutral were sent to Earth, and they became the fairies. And then we all know that in the literature about the infernals, who were cast down here and lived in the underworld, both inside of us and outside of us, their lore is full of sexual encounters as well. So I see no reason why the angels who remained or who remained faithful wouldn't also have a sexual component, especially since we do have that story that they found the daughters of men fair and reproduced with them, producing the mighty men of old, men of renown, and you know, and so on and so forth. Thank you so very much.
My pleasure, Hercules. As always, I have a great time on these casts.
As do we. And now onward to Khamuast. Khamuast, student of ancient Egyptian tradition and many more occult things besides. What does your journey and your search tell you? that you could share with us?
There are many different things that have happened throughout the centuries, as was just mentioned. I feel there were actually in Mediterranean, not necessarily Egyptian, but Mediterranean and African traditions where space creatures came. Some Persians or those people would have called them demons, came and mated with human women. And the resulting creature is called a cambion. And they're an interesting creature. They're half human and half some sort of spiritual being, either be it, they call it jinn or demon or angel, what have you. But they're a grayish color, which is interesting. Sometimes they're seen with horns, sometimes they have scales, sometimes they have 3 eyes, which is interesting. There's usually a 3rd eye. In Egypt, they're serpent-like. And you mentioned this, they are told to have serpent-like skin. Some of them can expand their backbone and their neck to look like a cobra. So they were called cobra people. And then, that reminds me, back in the 80s, 70s, or early 80s, there was a television series called V,
Yes.
where we had people that came from the other side of the stars, and they were snake people. There many times they showed them eating mice and such, and they were cobra people. I happen to have worked on the series. In fact, they ran out of extras and they took us on the core. So they slapped snake heads on all of us. It was a lot of fun. It was very uncomfortable. But they'd show us from here up because the rest of us had clothes on. But it was an interesting thing, and it was a lot of fun. But so this is where I get this idea for cambions too. I had a personal experience with something like that when I was a neophyte, part of our grove, I'll call it. My teacher and I were in what's called Hecate's Woods, which is actually on Long Island. And we were walking to go to a ritual, and something gray reached up out of the ground. There was a pit, and there were hands. It looked like, it was very strange. It looked like things coming out of corpses and such, but they weren't. They were gray, they were thin, they were hairless. And I called out from my mother goddess, who was Isis, and the hands just went back into the earth. And it was very frightening. As a young man, my belief in some of the things I do believe in now was, believe it or not, or half away, my faith was not as it is now. So to be shown these things, I even went back into that area later on when he was gone to see that there weren't a bunch of actors dressed that way, and I thought he may have brought them. There was nobody, but the ground was burned. And that was kind of interesting. So he told me that these were these cambions, and then later on I looked them up, and I saw that in Persian traditions and also ancient Greek traditions, ancient Neolithic Greek traditions, in Egyptian and African, these creatures existed. Lesser divine beings who were mating with humans to create some other kind of beings, which is kind of spooky. I was going to mention also, I told you about this earlier, Hercules. I was, as I told you many times, walking with my dog in Florida, and I encountered a being. And it's funny because you described her, Tim, to the bone, and she had a female body. She was covered in a silver suit. She had a slit for a mouth, sort of. There wasn't any lips, and a regular square, flat kind of a nose, and one slit that looked like would be one nostril, and normal eyes that were behind a visor. And she had long blonde hair, which is, when you said that, it freaked me out. I was like, oh my goodness, I saw this. She, with telepathy, let me know that her name was Vrel, Fvrel. Now, I didn't think about this, and I was watching something a couple of days ago on Ancient Aliens, as it were. And they mentioned that Hitler had a beautiful group of women with long, long hair that were psychics that were contacting extraterrestrials. And the group was called Vrel. And I thought, oh my God, was I contacting what they were contacting? And then my, I just went berserk. I thought, oh my God, this is so cool. And I got scared. And I wondered what her intentions were. I was 21 years old at the time. I had my dog with me. I was taken back. And she said, we will see you again. And I also told you years ago about this, I'll call it a flying chandelier that I've been seeing since I was a child that from time to time shows up in my life. She, this Rel, indicated through telepathy that that was a ship that was keeping an eye on me all these years. I didn't know why. She didn't explain why, but she said, you will see us again. Don't worry. And just keep on the right track, she said. And so thereby hangs a tale, as it were. What do you think, Hercules?
I think that is awesome. I think the synchronicity that you experienced recently bears some exploration.
Yes.
Research that group of women that were contacting aliens for the Nazis and see where that takes you.
When I saw the name and it was spelled the same way this alien told me I don't know if she said that was her name or she was one of the Vrel. It blew my mind. I'll be honest. I was like, I got confirmation and I was also frightened at the same time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us here tonight.
Thank you.
And now we go to Brian of Brian's Drive-In Theater. And one thing that Tim has brought up a few times, and Setna brought it up tonight, is that there is in our literature and in our entertainment, the seeds of what later appears as otherworld encounters, be they with celestials or with other dimensional beings or with forest entities or elementals or so forth. And it's alarming when you start to study it and you have people in out of the way places reporting seeing the creature from the Black Lagoon, for instance, in conjunction with a flying disc at the sky. So I believe very strongly that popular culture is part of our modern mythology. And just like these encounters that we have with other world beings, whatever the origin, is part of our living folklore. And it's all part of the gestalt of living in the here and now. And it has many ancient themes interwoven with it, and it's mutating maybe all these tales into something that'll be more appropriate for tomorrow. So what Brian's going to share with us, even though it's not true paranormal tales, is phenomenally important. So there you go, Brian.
Well, as I canvassed through all of the old great B movies from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, there are lots of films that feature sex, either intentional, would be, or actual in films. Starting back to, let's say, I Married a Monster from Outer Space, which is also the subject of my attire tonight. It's a great old drive-in film from AIP, starring Gloria Talbot and Tom Tryon, who abandoned his acting career in the late '60s and became actually a fiction writer of very well known one, a very well respected one. In this film, there is a Tom Tryon who goes out for a bachelor party the night before his wedding, and meets up with some aliens and is duplicated by the aliens. So he's incarcerated, and there's an alien who has taken on his form and enters into a marriage contract with Gloria Talbot. And after a year, Gloria Talbot has noticed that the alien's not having sex with her. So she eventually figures out that he is an alien and figures out that they're still trying to work out how the alien is going to breed with Gloria Talbot, but that is the intention in this one. And of course, yeah, things don't go the aliens' ways. The American heterosexual couple get back together in the end and presumably go make babies. But that was the 1950s. You couldn't. Anybody who had sex in a film in the 50s or 60s for that matter, got punished. Well, in the 70s and 80s too. Now that I think about it. There's also Queen of Outer Space. I cannot find my copy.
Da.
I can't find my copy of it, but it's in a collection with a few other films, and off the top of my head I couldn't remember, but I was able to find my copy of I Married a Monster from Outer Space, which is a lot of fun, and I do recommend it if you're looking for 90 minutes worth of escapist entertainment. And some quality performances in in I Married a Monster from Outer Space. Another one, the one that I'm actually watching right now as we speak, is this, Jim? Mars Needs Women. This is an American international film from 1967. Actually, it was made for television. AIP had a lot of films by that point that they wanted to sell into syndication. A lot of their horror output from the late 50s and early 60s, they were really eager to put into syndication packages and sell them, across the country, into Canada, wherever they could, in order to make a buck off these old movies. And like I said, the overwhelming number of them for horror films, which went to, horror hosts, across the nation, right? Well, they didn't quite have enough films, so they gave a low-budget director named Larry Buchanan about $25,000 per picture to do a number of pictures, I think 8 or 9, that would be directly released into a syndication package. They were never going to be shown in a theater. They were shot on incredibly tight schedules. And because it was more expensive to shoot in Los Angeles than it was in Dallas, Larry Buchanan was from Dallas, and he shot his movies there. And Mars Needs Women is just one of those. Now, with Larry Buchanan's movies, what he would typically do is he would take somebody who still had a few days worth of a contract with American International Pictures. What happened oftentimes is that the beach party crowd, the ones who were still under contract, got shoved into these pictures to finish out their contracts, which unfortunately weren't renewed because those films, had passed on their way out. So for Mars Needs Women, we've got Tommy Kirk, who is in Pajama Party, which is an American International beach party film, and he is an alien in that, in a Pajama Party, that is, and he is trying to mate with Annette Funicello. So not Disney would have allowed that. And I don't think Tommy Kirk would have allowed it either, now that we talk. But it's a lot of fun. Yvonne Craig had very little good to say about it, but most of the people that I knew who had been in the Larry Buchanan movie had very little good to say about it. My friend Aaron Kincaid was in one of Larry Buchanan's movies because he was coming off his AIP contract, called Creature of Destruction. And Aaron was so incensed about having to do the movie that he would only stay for 4 days because that's all it said he had to stay for in his contract. And he wound up dubbing his lines in the taxi cab on the way to the airport on a field trip. He was mighty proud of that too, by the way.
Ryan?
They got 4 days, and that was that.
Ryan, did you like Earth Girls Are Easy?
You know what? We have a copy of it, and until yesterday, my only viewing of it had been in the late 1980s, probably on VHS when it hit the video rental stores, and I'd kind of forgotten about it, so I did take a look. It's fun. It actually has a really strong cast. If you look at it, it's Gina Davis.
Jeff Goldblum.
Goldblum, they got married during the production to each other during the production of the movie. Jim Carrey and Damon Wayans from In Living Color. This is pre In Living Color. Are two of the aliens, along with Jeff Goldblum and Julie Brown, who did some horror movies earlier in her career before she was sort of given over to comedy. And she does a number or two in the movie because it is a musical.
And she's blonde.
Well,
Right.
that
Kinda.
day, but
The other one,
easy. It's a lot of fun, and it's done in the spirit of, let's say a campy 60s movie. It's low camp because everybody's in on the joke. But it's still a lot of fun to watch. And unfortunately, the movie didn't do very well at the box office initially. It was produced by Vestron Video. And Vestron, back in the 80s, as you'll remember, if you went to a video store, a lot of the cheesy, low-budget horror films were always released on Vestron. And Vestron had pulled enough money together to do a big budget film. And I think they spent $10 or $12 million, which was a lot for Vestron. And the movie bombed, and eventually they folded in the early 1990s. So it didn't do Vestron any favors.
no.
But the movie lived on, though. A lot of people saw it on TV, and sort of developed a sort of a cult around it, which is great. It's nice to see a film not completely miss its audience. I like to see a movie, if it is worthy, if it is good enough, to find its intended audience. And oftentimes that does happen on television. I'm not sure it happened with Mars Needs Women. And there are so many of these. I mean, Barbarella, the astral sex in Barbarella is amazing. And that is a movie I've seen probably 20 times. Barbarella's it's mindless escapism, but it's really a lot of fun, and it's really dated. Well, I mean, a lot of things are dated now, but it's really dated now in terms of sexual mores and such. Some of the taglines from Barbarella are just incredible. Who gives up the pill? Who takes sex to outer space? Who's the girl of the 21st century? Who nearly dies of pleasure? Who seduces an angel? And that was John Philip Law in Barbarella. Barbarella is a lot of fun and horribly campy. I mean, really, really campy. Doesn't say a whole lot to a current audience, however, but it is an interesting artifact of its time, the 1960s, and how sex was perceived and what it was like back then. And if you look at it, it is pretty open. And I do like the astral sex that she, initially starts having and then finds something better, perhaps. There's one more that I want to talk about, only from the standpoint that although I'll never sell my copy of Wham Bam Thank You Spaceman, it is a truly terrible movie. It is god awful. Have any of you seen it?
I don't recall seeing that one. I thought I'd seen every horrible movie in existence.
Don't.
Is it as bad as Basket Case?
Oh no, it's 10 times worse than Basket Case. I mean, Basket Case is awful, but this is truly terrible.
No,
This is very bad. It's like a lot. It's softcore porn essentially, and it does have some actors who kind of rode that obscure line between a naughty flick and porn back in the early 70s. Porn back then isn't quite what it is now. But they had, like I said, they had a lot of actors who kind of blurred those lines back then. Valda Hansen, who had been in an Ed Wood movie in the late 1950s, interestingly. Still, looks great here. Diane Thorne, who was a cult actress who passed away not too long ago, is also in this. Tally Cochran, who did do some softcore stuff in the 70s, is also one of the women attacked by these two really goofy looking aliens. That there's nothing erotic about this thing at all. I mean, nobody would ever pleasure himself or herself after watching this thing. I mean, it's not that kind of movie. Unfortunately, it also tries to be funny in addition to titillating, and it's not funny either. But it's a bit like a train wreck in that you just, oh my God, you can't believe what you're seeing, and you can't look away even though it's horrifying. And interestingly enough, an old acquaintance of mine, John Ireland Jr.,
Oh
the
my
son of
God.
the actor John Ireland,
Yeah.
is in this movie, and was not particularly proud of it, as I recall. from, from my, he's in one of my favorite movies, however, which is called "Come On, Let's Live a Little." It is a late quasi beach party movie from 1967. And it stars Bobby V, Jackie DeShannon, and Kim Carnes, the singer from the early 1980s, is in it as well, with Patsy Kelly, and Eddie Hodges, a few other people. Well, John Ireland is sort of the antagonist in Come On, Let's Live a Little. So it's interesting to see that he got a job in this, and he did work behind the scenes in other better films. But this thing, it was one of those something weird purchases from about 20, 25 years ago. And I've been on a roll with something weird. Everything that they had released was really campy and cult, great. But every once in a while, you pick up something like Wham Bam Thank You Spaceman.
The title alone is worth framing.
Well, and that's just it. It's so much like an old drive-in movie in that the title is amazing, the poster art is incredible, but the movie is shit.
Well, who directed and who released that movie?
It was directed by William Levy, who also directed Blackenstein the same year. He made both movies. He made Blackenstein. He released it in 1973, and he shot Wham Bam Thank You Spaceman in 73, but it didn't make it out until 75, and it's unrated. But it's like I said, it's nobody would get their jollies for watching. I mean, you can watch it and be sort of astounded. It would be good to have on at a Halloween party or something like that, because it is just not erotic, at all.
There was one film that's pretty frightening. I think it's from the 70s also, the late 70s. It was called Entity, and that shows pretty explicit sex.
You are right. I'd forgotten about Entity. There's also The Man Who Fell to Earth, which
David Bowie, yeah.
And that one really makes you think, and it's not a drive-in movie. And interesting, well, I don't know if it's an interesting story, but my story behind this is my mother and I were big Bowie fans in the 70s. Well, I mean, everybody was, Thin White Duke, Fame, Young Americans had been on the radio. So we were dying to go see the David Bowie movie, and we do. And it is bizarre. And I'm only about 10 or 11 years old at the time and understood none of it. It's got a great cast, though. I've since watched it now that I'm not 11 anymore, and get more of it. It is more or less. It's a very depressing movie, but it's very realistic in kind of showing you how shallow and materialistic our existence typically is, and how we can corrupt others who aren't shallow and materialistic into being shallow and materialistic. So it's a document of the 70s, but I think it has a lot to say still. About materialism, such, in a fantastic cast. I mean, Rip Torn, Candy Clark, who was really on a run in the 70s. She's in American Graffiti. She's in a lot of fun films back then. Bernie Casey, football player turned actor, and Buck Henry is in it too.
I love Buck Henry.
just the basic plot behind it is, David Bowie, sort of falls to Earth because his planet's dying and it needs water. So he concocts this idea to start a successful corporation, and then he will have enough resources in order to build a spaceship to get back to his home planet and help with the water situation. But then he sort of gets mired down in business world and materialism and loses sight of his goal. I won't say any more about the plot from there because I don't want to ruin it for everybody. But that one, like I said, it was very much more cerebral than probably a 10 or 11-year-old should have tried to comprehend. But we were thrilled to see David Bowie. So, and we did.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Welcome.
Again, a lot to think about and sort through and relate to the UFO and cryptid and other phenomenon that we normally explore. Now we have a little bit of time, and I would like to bring up this topic again because we just scratched the surface today. I'd also like to explore in our next conversation a related, although not seemingly so, topic. There is a concept in Eastern spirituality and occultism called creating a tulpa. And a tulpa is basically a mental creation that comes to life. And I think that part of the phenomenon of seeing cinematic or literary creatures tied to UFOs or other phenomenon ties into how Tibetans, let's say, make tulpas. So I will explain a little bit more as we approach next month's conversation, but I'd like to touch upon that next: mind monsters or mind aliens or mind entities. And we could even talk about entity, which Setna brought up. Does that sound like a topic you'd like to explore?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Definitely.
Awesome. So we'll do that next. And we have enough time for everybody to give a closing comment to cap today's episode and to share their contact information. And again, we'll start with Tim.
Do you want me to start, Hercules? I'll start. Well, I'll give my contact information, and then I have a question real quick for Brian.
Okay.
You can find all of my books on Amazon.com. Just type in my name, Tim R. Swartz, and they'll all come tumbling out for your reading pleasure, both print and ebooks. You can also find some at your favorite local bookstore and hopefully your local library. So please check out both of those. And our latest book, and Hercules has an excellent chapter in this book, is Mimics, the Others Among Us. And I highly recommend everyone to go out and get yourself, 6 or 7 dozen copies. Give to your friends and loved ones.
The more copies you read, the more the information permeates your brain and changes.
Exactly. Exactly. And my website is conspiracyjournal.com, where we like to say we've got all the weird news and information that they don't want you to know. And just real quick, a question for Brian here. I was thinking of a movie that was made in the early 60s that was made up of a couple of guys who worked for AIP. And they actually came up with funding, did the movie themselves, and they played like Army privates who ran across a landed spaceship with 2 very 50s-style buxom alien space women inside. And they teach the women, like how to kiss and make love. And of course, the title has now completely slipped my brain. But I just happened to watch it not too long ago.
I have that. I ordered it like a month ago. It's still sitting in my stack over there.
Do you remember the title of it?
I remember, but if Brian doesn't know the title, I'll walk over to my stack and see if I can.
Well, the problem is that is there's like 5 or 6 movies that could apply to in the early
there
60s
is
from AIP. AIP recycled plots. Well, Mars Needs Women is actually a recycled plot. to tell you the truth.
Yeah, but I mean the actresses who played the space women, I mean they were, like your typical 50s,
Mm.
with the torpedo
Bullet bra.
yeah, the bullet bras.
Mhm.
And of course they were like a head taller than the comedic actors who were playing the privates who ran across them. But I seem to remember that these actors had actually uh, kind of financed this movie themselves, and got other people to give them money to do it. And who knows? I mean, it probably got more exposure on television, because the first time I ever saw it naturally was on like your weekend creature feature
Mhm.
type of movie.
It was fairly rare for an AIP movie at that time not to make money because the budgets were so tight.
Uh,
And because they bundled everything together into double features, even if you had two bad movies, you still had two movies and a ready audience at the drive-in for them. So it was kind of unusual for an AIP film to not generate some sort of profit.
Yeah, well, I mean, and this one you could tell. I mean, it obviously was on like maybe about a $5,000 or $10,000 budget.
Yeah.
And they used probably used short ends to film it with. But yeah, I mean, it's one of these that every once in a while I'll run across it and watch it, and it's about as bad as I remember it to be.
I think it's Invasion of the Star Creatures.
Oh,
That's it. That's it. That's it.
all right.
Yep.
Ooh, that is
Invasion.
bad. Oh my, oh, that is
Showing
bad,
it
bad,
all,
bad,
but-
bad, bad.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And I also found my Queen of Outer Space copy while I was there.
Yay.
Oh, yeah.
And bringing ancient Atlantis into the same mythos as those movies, Fire Maidens of Outer Space.
Oh, that's
Oh,
right.
Oh, yeah.
There was a whole genre of going to the moon and finding women there
Yes.
types of movies.
Catwoman on the Moon.
Catwomen on the Moon. I just saw that one the other night. But yeah, I mean the Queen of Outer Space, and gosh, there was I mean it wasn't the moon, it was Venus, the Three Stooges movie.
Oh, that's
Where they
right.
go, yeah, where they go, they go to Venus and find a lost race of women. Obviously, men fantasy type of deals here.
Well, they were the one producing the movies.
Right, right, yeah.
Brian and I were just talking about one of the moon movies not too long ago on one of his shows.
Was it the Abbott and Costello?
No, we were talking about nudist colonies in the movies.
Oh, Nude on the Moon.
Nude on
Yes.
the Moon, yes.
Those old early 60s nudies are if you're looking for high camp, if you want a great laugh and something that really isn't titillating at all, some of those movies are a riot. I know Hercules is tired of me saying this, but if you ever want a good laugh, find a copy of Blaze Star Goes Nudist. It is a riot. It
Oh,
is
no.
so funny.
Oh, no.
Unintentionally, of course, which is the best kind of funny. But
Thank you very much, Tim.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And Brian,
yes,
any
you can
last
find me.
words and where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Brian's Drive-In Theater, briansdrivein-theater.com. And if you want to interact with me on social media, that's going to be Facebook, and search for Brian J. Walker, Brian Walker, or Brian's Drive-In Theater, and I should pop up.
And any last words of wisdom or any questions you have as we wrap up?
No, I would have been fun to have talked about my stepmother as an alien, but I neglected to discuss that one. But maybe we'll leave that for next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, Setna of Kemet.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, you can reach me at my new address, which is 1699 Chatham, Chatham Parkway, number 1523A, Savannah, Georgia. 34105. And no, 31405. I get confused. And that's Savannah, Georgia. You can get me at mkwaterman@icloud.com. You can get me on Facebook at Michael K. Waterman. You can get me, well, the police are still looking. You can get me at my phone number, which is 516-650-3691. My phone number is still Long Island. I'm not going to change that. And you can also get me, of course, with Hercules, and at my email, which is mkwaterman@icloud.com. I think I mentioned that already. Otherwise, I'm around, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you.
And do you have any last words of wisdom or any questions you'd like to ask anybody, or any expansion you'd like to make to anything we discussed tonight?
I want to talk more about this rail situation that we talked about, that I brought up before with the Nazis. I'm very interested because I'd never heard that before. And when I saw it on the Ancient Aliens, and they were bringing up this thing, I flipped out because I had spoken to this being. And now I'm hearing that these women had spoken to this being. So if anybody else has any more information about it, I'd like to know more about it.
And if you put together something, I will gladly spread it and see if we could find somebody who might have interacted with Varel as well.
I think that's cool. I don't want to hear from the Nazis. Thank you.
Wise choice. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
And thank you to our wonderful listeners. I'm Hercules Invictus. You could find me in life as Hercules Invictus. You could find me on Facebook, and you can find me on YouTube and on Blog Talk Radio, all those Hercules Invictus. Thank you, all wonderful guests. You shed much light on very many things, and I know I'll be thinking about these things till we talk again. Thank you again for being here, and I wish you great things in all your endeavors.
We'll say goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I got company all of a sudden.